You are listening to the Mark Guzman Podcast Experience. A true veteran of the art world, John Kleber and his wife Carol have brought their love of art to their community with their studio, Art Euphoria. Located in Martinez, California, Art Euphoria provides a space for all ages to get their creative juices flowing. There are even days when you can come in and paint your own pet. John is a Hollywood veteran, having worked in the art department of several productions and worked with companies such as Disney and Warner Brothers. Today, we talk to John about what it takes to operate an art studio for the public, as well as dive into the world of Hollywood artistry. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
Now, you have a studio called Art Euphoria, correct?
Yes, I do.
And that's located out of Martinez.
Yes, it is.
So when did you start the studio?
We started the studio. I'm in a partnership with my wife, Carol, and we started the studio back in 2012. I got jury duty in Martinez, right? And I had to go there, and I actually got selected. So I spent a couple weeks there on a case, and every day at lunch I would go walk around and look at all the buildings. And I like really authentic old, brick buildings like that because they tend to be authentic in Martinez. They're not like, I live in Walnut Creek. I very rarely go downtown Walnut Creek, hardly ever. Walnut Creek has this feeling of it was all created by Disney. They try to be old, but it was created,
Very commercialized.
Yeah, it's been pushed.
Yeah.
It's been pushed. Whereas in Martinez, you find a building that's old, one of those old brick buildings there. They're old, man. They're really old.
Well, many people don't know that Martinez used to be the state capital for
That's
a little
right.
while.
That is exactly right. It was. So I went there for jury duty, and I walked around. And I saw all these beautiful buildings, and I thought, this would be a great place to have a studio. And studios to me always were private studios where I would do my work. But I always like big places because I do, in my spare time when I'm not creating graphics and illustration, so on and so forth for commercial purposes, I would do fine art and I do big art. I like big paintings. And I also like constructing things. I like making things out of wood. So it was perfect for me to have a big space. And so I was looking around, I saw these really wonderful big spaces. And at the same time, I had a client that I was working with in Beijing, China, of all places, who was trying to get a television show off the ground, and they wanted some production design done. And so she was an old friend of mine, and so I decided to do it. And we were talking one day, and she said, "Have you ever heard of a place called Art Jammin'?" And I said, "Art Jammin', what's that?" She goes, "Darndest thing." She goes, "People pay money to go into this place, sit down and paint, and they drink wine and stuff while they're doing it."
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it does sound like a lot of fun. So I'm thinking, that sounds like that kind of thing could work. And she said, "It's packed all the time. They've done news stories on it here. It's a new phenomenon." There's bars that are cropping up where it's a regular bar in the front, but there's this room you can go into in the back, and there's people back there painting. It's an odd thing.
That's a very cool concept, though.
Yes, it is a really cool concept. So I thought, that would be great to try. And so having been right there in Martinez, I just decided, why not put it here? I didn't know a lot about the town other than it was kind of quaint. I pictured it kind of like a Mayberry kind of place where maybe somebody had a key to the jail and let themselves in and out when they were drunk, and they could just kind of go in there and sleep it off. It seemed like this really small place to me, and real authentic with real genuine people. And so I thought, this is a good place to put this. This would be good. So the original business plan was to be nothing more than one of those paint places. The thing about it is that both my wife and I have extensive experience in graphic design, and for me it's illustration, and then film production, all kinds of stuff followed. But being illustrators and working for a lot of the best people around and working with the best people around, made us kind of fussy. And I didn't want to do just the regular old, you know, they come in, they paint a picture of a sunset with a silhouette of a palm tree in front of it. You know, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something better. So we tried to emphasize the end result of the painting a little bit more than the socialization. We also didn't have a liquor license. So all we could do is have people bring their own liquor in. So we weren't really getting in on the money part of the business. I think the business plan is really where you almost give the painting away, but you sell them liquor all night. You sell them wine all night, you know, $9, $10, $11 a glass.
Yeah, high profit margins.
Absolutely. That's where the money was. So we didn't really understand that in the beginning. So we operated for almost 4 years under the premise that this would be, it'd be okay, that we would book so many parties that we wouldn't have to worry about. We'd do it volume. We'd do volume business, and we wouldn't have to worry about the booze. Well, it worked and it didn't work. The place went for about 4 years, and it finally started to break even. Just breaking even. And that wasn't with me taking any salary. That wasn't, you know, anything like that. But what happened in the process of that, too, was that the business expanded from just being a paint place in the evenings. I started taking in kids after school, do these after school programs, right, for kids. And and people started using it. Now, it was weird because in order for me to compete, I had to compete against the Boys Club and Girls Club in Martinez, right in downtown Martinez, where most of the people sent their kids. Because for $24 a year, their kids could go there every day after school and play for like 3 hours.
But can they paint there?
Yeah, they can do all kinds of things. They can weave beads. They had pottery. They had all kinds of stuff. But it really, because so many kids take advantage of it, and it's a great thing. I don't want to say anything bad about the Boys Club and Girls Club because they're great. But there's so many kids, and a lot of the kids, they wouldn't be devoted to any of those activities because they also had pool tables, video games. They had stuff for the kids that are just going to be there for a couple of hours while their parents, you know, finish their workday and then come and get them.
Yeah.
So we wanted our kids to be more kids that were really interested in art and developing art. And so and the program was successful. For 3 years we ran, and we were successful, and we charged $100 a month. You could come as much as you wanted for $100 a month. It's from 2:30 to 5:30 every day. They could be there for 3 hours every day. And it worked to a certain extent, but still people were looking at that going, no, they can go to the Boys Club and Girls Club for $24 a year. Why should I spend that extra money? You know? So we got a certain portion of the population, but we didn't get everybody like we thought we might. And it's, you know, so the business has been challenging in finding things that worked and things that didn't work. I had a Saturday morning class, figure drawing class and a basic drawing class. And that's been my big kind of thing so far.
And that's where you're at now.
Yeah, and the parties that we have, we still do parties. We still do corporate parties where we do corporate team building exercises through art.
Okay.
We have a program that I developed called About Face that's for the veterans, and we teach them how to do a self-portrait so that hopefully they can kind of deal with whatever they've been through in the military and kind of bring it out, purge it, you know, put it on the canvas. And it's therapeutic for them. So we started a program like that. We have a carving class that meets on Thursday nights. Our carving, regular wildlife carving class.
Okay, so you're not just painting.
Oh, no. My background has provided me with the kind of thing where I love to try all kinds of mediums. I've always been one of these people that tried a lot of different mediums. It's what got me into the film industry in the first place. You know, I spent 35 years as an illustrator before I did any film at all.
So let's talk about that because you also brought some pieces of work that you've done over the years,
Well,
correct?
I brought some stuff, some production design stuff, just to show you guys the kind of quality that we had. My experience at Disney was really interesting. When I got out of school, I wanted to go to work for Disney in the worst way. That's all I wanted to do. You know, that was the thing I wanted to be. And so when I went to art school,
I think that's still the thing today. Disney, Pixar,
Disney,
ImageWorks.
Pixar, yeah, it's because they're such a huge provider now for jobs. That's why a lot of people turn to Pixar, they turn to Disney because they really do provide a lot of jobs. There's a lot of jobs that are for artists that are available in film production in particular. So, but in those days, I just wanted to work for Disney. I looked at them and looked at what they did and said, this is the highest quality. There is no other high quality. You can say what you want about the weird, schmaltzy kind of really heavy, syrupy kind of stuff that Disney was, the kind of movies that they made. They felt like that, but there was one thing about them always. They were always beautiful. Really beautiful, really well
Well-made
done.
films.
The best animators, the best stuff. There's a current film right now that Glenn Keane worked on that Kobe Bryant is involved with, and it's an animated film of Kobe Bryant kind of as a little kid growing up. And Glenn Keane was the guy that animated Tarzan for Disney. He is kind of the godfather of, he's the big deal in animation. There's nobody better. This guy's amazing. And just to see his, and be there, see his work, and to be among the artists that were there, it gave me a whole different take on what it was to be a Disney artist, but along the way they get you to drink the Kool-Aid too. So
How was it for you when you first entered the process of working with Disney?
It's really strange because I had spent a good, I think, 35 years on my own in a studio on my own working as a freelance. I had 35 years worth of freelance work that was just, they were stacked up. The jobs were stacked up like little airplanes waiting to land. It was in the heyday of illustration. It was in one of the big, illustration and photography. It's interesting. They ebb and flow. Everything's photography for a while, and then illustration will catch up, and there'll be a lot of illustration, and then it'll go like that. Well, what's happened now, the computer changed all that, because I was working when we did everything traditionally. And my career moved into when we had computers as well. But when we did everything by hand, there was this sense of every piece was precious. And all of a sudden along comes the computer, and you can spit out 19 ways of doing one image, 19 different possibilities
Within
for doing
minutes,
one image.
right?
Within seconds. Just ding, 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 ding. Just by changing colors and moving saturation points and changing the values and changing the lightness and the darkness, exposure times, all this stuff was all controllable.
Do you miss
infinite.
Do you miss the
I do.
handmade?
Yeah, I still draw. Everything that I do now still starts out outside the computer. And I make sketches and I make drawings. And there are guys at Pixar that do the same thing, and my hat's off to those guys, the ones that are still holding on. And they want to do things traditionally because there's a certain simplicity and a beauty to it. There's this weird, I don't know, it feels like the machine has been taken completely out of the process. Here I am working again with nothing more than a piece of paper and a pencil.
Does it feel like your own creativity can come out 100% when you're doing hand-drawn?
Yeah, because I know now, this is the interesting thing, the computer made this possible, because I know now everything that I draw, there aren't too many of them that I can't turn into something. It used to be you'd draw something 10 times to get it right once. You know, because here's the thing about being an illustrator versus being a fine artist. An illustrator, you get a call from Time Magazine. They want you to paint a portrait of Obama for the cover of Time Magazine. He's going to be Man of the Year, or whatever it is, whatever the assignment is. You get that assignment, and you have to turn that thing in pretty much overnight. They don't.
Really?
They're notorious for not getting ahead, not booking you ahead. You know, they wait for the last minute and then they'll call you. And that, in my case, that might have just been because I was one of the also rans. Oh yeah, if we can't get this guy, we can get John. We can't get this guy, we'll get John. And that was when I was starting my career out.
So they played like the supply and demand game.
Yeah, they always did. And then the money was nothing. If you wanted to do the cover of Rolling Stone, you weren't going to get paid much for it. They give you $100, maybe a couple $100. But everybody wanted the cover of Rolling Stone because it launched a lot of illustrators. Playboy magazine launched a hell of a lot of illustrators in the 70s and probably the 60s too. It's amazing what these magazines, the power they had. They don't have that power anymore because nobody reads magazines hardly anymore.
Everything's online now.
Everything's online.
I mean, you have YouTubers and bloggers. I mean, that have way more views than your average television show.
You know, and I'm a paper whore because I love paper. I just can't keep my hands off paper. Paper is great to me. So magazines are still something that I enjoy looking at and going through. And when I see a document, anything that's been printed really nice, you know, it's impressive to me. But that's just because of the background and the fact that I'm older than dirt now and I've been around a long time, and I appreciate those things because that's the way we used to do everything. We did everything by hand.
So what projects do you work on while with Disney?
When I was with Disney, they actually hired me. It's an interesting story. They hired me to do this freelance project with them. And they were putting together for a videotape, mind you. This was for video. This was beta tapes. They were making beta tapes. And they were going to gang up 5 different nursery rhymes. They weren't nursery rhymes. They were stories like Little Red Riding Hood, Three Little Pigs, Jack and the Beanstalk. I can't remember the other one. There were 3 or 4 of them that they were going to link together, and they were going to sell it because videotapes, anything that had the Disney name on it during the baby booming thing that happened,
those would sell out,
in
right?
The 80s, 90s. Would sell. They'd sell every single one of them. It just had to have the Disney name on it. It didn't matter if it was awful. It just had to have the Disney name. So they would sell these things, and they'd sell a lot of them. And so they were going to. That's how our project came about. So I got a call from Disney, and they said, "Would you be interested?" There's this guy, Steve Moore, turned out to be a really great guy and a good friend of mine. He says, Steve said, "John, would you be willing to be an art director for us on this project that we have? We're doing a short." And I said, no, I don't know anything about production design. I couldn't possibly do that for you. Never done it before in my life. It sounds complicated, and I'm just happy in my studio. I'm making art. I'm fine. He said, no, really. We looked at your portfolio, and we want you to do exactly what you do in your portfolio. And then I said, oh, guys, I said, my stuff is really edgy, and I said, it's kind of sometimes not politically correct. Sometimes it's a little, sexually charged. I said, I'm not for you guys. I don't think so. He said, no, listen, would you try? He finally talked me into trying a sample. He said, listen, I just need you to build a time machine. He says, build me a crazy looking time machine and send it to me. And I said, oh, all right. So I designed this time machine thing, and I sent it off in the FedEx. In those days, everything went FedEx. So I sent it to him FedEx, and about 2 weeks went by, and I didn't hear anything. Never called, never nothing. I never heard anything. And I figured, well, there you go. That's why I didn't want to, because I didn't want to waste your time. Well, I get a call back, and Steve says, so did you, have you seen my package? And I said, never got a package. And he said, I sent a package the other day. Didn't get there yet. He says, when your FedEx comes today, give me a call. So my FedEx comes, and I open the thing up. Came. And I opened this thing up, and it wasn't a beta tape. It was a 3/4-inch tape, like they use in ad agencies to watch commercials. That gives you more quality than you get with a VHS or with a beta. Right?
Okay.
So the thing was like this thick, and it was like that, and it needed a special player so you could look at it. And I said, I can't even watch the thing.
You didn't have the special player?
No, I don't have the player, man. I called Steve. I said, what the hell are you sending me a 3/4-inch tape for? I can't do anything with this. I said, for Christ's sakes. I said, this is just massive. Where am I supposed to watch it? And he goes, don't you know anybody that's got a player? And I said, I can go to So I figured I called one of my buddies at the ad agency. I said, I got to come over. I got to watch this thing. I stuck it in, and here's my time machine, and it's moving across the screen. It's running, and it's moving across the screen, and it's smoking, and it's spitting stuff out, and it's doing all this, and the wings are flapping, and everything that I designed it for is there, and it's all moving.
So they built it.
They built it, and they built it. No, they drew it. They animated it. In those days, everything was animated 2D. There was no 3D. You didn't stick it in a computer and turn it into an object. We designed it flat, and then we'd have to do turnarounds. So you'd design it from the front, from the side, from the back, so that a guy could actually animate the thing. Right? It was like a prop.
Okay.
So they'd have to treat it like a prop. It has to be animated. And so it was all done, and I did everything with Xerox engravings, anything I could find, photos, and then I'd paint whatever wasn't there. I'd paint it in my style, and it got this hybrid weirdness, and they loved it. They really loved it. So then they really started to hound me. Please, please. And I'm still going, what would I do? I mean, I already gave you the time machine. What else would I do? And they said, we need an art director and we need a production designer. And I'm going, man, those are leadership roles. I can't even lead myself to the bathroom sometimes. I said, how am I gonna fucking do this for you? I can't. And they said, you'll pick it up as we go along. You'll kind of pick it up. Steve will work with you and he'll show you everything you got to do. He says, it's just little stuff. It's like you got to make a color script. And I said, a color script for a 15-minute movie? I said, oh my God. And they said, 500-600 frames. It's not a big deal. They're tiny little things, and they just show mood. So all you have to do is have colors down so that we can see what kind of colors to make the palettes for the clothes, for the characters,
okay,
all the stuff. And I said, I know, make it look right, make it look good. And so bottom line was, all right. I couldn't stand the hounding anymore. I just said, okay, I'll do it. And it was the greatest thing, and I loved it. They let me work in my own studio. I didn't have to go to Hollywood. I just sit there all day long and knock out different colorways of handling this storyboard script that they sent me.
Where was your studio at that time?
Phoenix. I was in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. I had shared a studio space with a painter named Ed Mell, who went on to be a very, very good painter. He's had a lot of museum shows now. He's a good guy. He's a little bit older than me. He and I were been good friends. But anyway, I was in his studio, so I was in Phoenix, and they never sent anybody over. They didn't call very often. I'd talk to Steve, and Steve would say things like, hey, buddy, it looks great, keep it up. And they didn't turn down anything that I sent them. And
they used everything?
They used everything. They used it all. And what it was not only were they paintings that they had to be environments, because they had to be little stages where the characters would play out action, right? And so what we do is we do a hero frame for each one of the sequences. You do a hero frame. like the interior of the wolf's house, the exterior of the wolf's house, the interior of the garage where he worked. You know, it was like that. And the cool thing about it was they got big name actors involved in it because it was Disney. So we're working with Mia Farrow, we're working with Garrison Keillor, we're working a lot of the guys that are on the outs list now. Garrison Keillor, we were Adam West, the original Batman.
Wow.
We had Don Rickles.
My stepson's a huge fan of Adam West.
Oh yeah, Adam West was a big deal. Getting him was a big deal, and we had Don Rickles, we had Kramer from Seinfeld, Michael Richards. We had Michael Richards in it too, and basically the story was the wolf could not move on from the fact that he never ate Little Red Riding Hood. It never worked out for him. So he had to go, he wanted to go back and do it again. So he built his time machine in his garage, and it takes him back in time to where it happened, and he tries a new tactic. He tries something new. And each time it doesn't work, he gets zapped in the time machine back to his house. But every time he comes back, he brings himself back as the new wolf, right? Because he tried something different. So he comes back as this, and they start to multiply because he makes these trips often. He keeps trying, and it fails every time. And it fails for more ridiculous reasons than you can imagine. It was kind of like, it had the ridiculousness of Ren and Stimpy. It had it was just absurd. It was absurd stuff. And the references were absurd. Granny came out of the closet one time in a Panzer tank, like shooting everything up. It was a wild ride. It was a wild ride. And it led me, what was interesting was working for Disney on that project. I had flirted around with that kind of stuff before because I'd gotten some illustration jobs and one of them was with the Pee-wee's Playhouse people. That came before Disney, but that was only a real brief thing. I mean, I spent a few days out in California with a studio called Colossal Pictures, which later became a place called Wild Brain. And these guys they made crazy stuff. They made stuff that no one had ever seen before.
And that was for Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yes, and they were doing things for Pee-wee's Playhouse. They were doing things for and the guy that was there at Colossal Pictures was one of the guys that was responsible for animating Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So they had some big people that were working there at that studio. And they loved this kind of half-painted, half-Xeroxed look that I was working on. So they hired me to do a Pizza Hut commercial for them that Pee-wee's Playhouse was going to own. And it would only run when Pee-wee's Playhouse was on because it directly related to the Pee-wee's Playhouse look, right? And so I met a bunch of people through that kind of helped advance my career into different aspects of film. It wasn't too long after working with animation that I wanted to actually do live action and stuff. Live action seemed much more appealing.
Yeah.
You could write stories and I was learning to become a story writer. That was the one thing I really, really learned at Disney was storytelling, visual storytelling, how to make people feel for little cartoon
Well, I think that's
characters.
one of the things that Disney really excels at. I mean, if you look at everything that they've done, even with Marvel,
Yes.
Marvel and now the Star Wars franchise,
Absolutely.
the one thing that they excel at is storytelling.
Story. They don't fool around with story. The thing has to be really good. They used to tell us if the story's good in an animated film, you can use stick people to play it out.
Yeah.
And people will love it.
Yeah, and I guess
doesn't matter.
the new Han Solo movie coming out, they had to get rid of the directors. They brought in Ron Howard.
Yeah.
They I mean, they completely had to start from scratch again,
Yeah.
just because, you know, it has to be their story a certain way, and they
It
just
does.
excel at it.
It does. So you probably want to know how all of this relates to Art Euphoria.
Yes.
Okay. I told you I have a tendency to steer off, so you just got to steer me back when I get steered off. Yeah, I never really wanted to move to Los Angeles. If I was going to pursue a career with the film industry for very long, you kind of got to be down there. I went down there to work for Warner Brothers, and I had to take an apartment down there. My family was up here. I have 2 kids and my wife, and my daughter is a very gifted basketball player. And so she had basketball almost year round. She played AAU basketball and stuff. She had almost year round. We had basketball. So they didn't want to move down to LA, and I understood why. We had a nice house over in Walnut Creek. I didn't want to leave that. And so I took this job with the idea that it would be about 8 months. And it was a Looney Tunes piece called Looney Tunes Back in Action. And what it was they were taking cartoon characters that they had hand animated and hand drawn, and they had a lighting system that this guy Scott Johnston had developed, and it was called Lumalight. I think it was called Lumalight, and it would put cast shadows onto characters, and it was the first time that anyone had figured out an easy way to do it, and it was kind of combining. It gave you a look that was sort of 2.5D. We used to call it 2.5D because it wasn't quite 3D, but it was better than 2D.
And this wasn't through computers yet.
Yeah, no, this was through computers. He developed this whole thing. He was one of the guys that helped develop Deep Canvas, which was a product that they used on Tarzan to animate for the first time. The backgrounds were all animated, and leaves were moving, and stuff where it was happening. That was Deep Canvas. So he was a pretty smart fellow, and he developed this Lumalight thing, and we ran it on these characters. And my responsibility for the project was I was the animation art director. So I oversaw all of the backgrounds that were made for the characters, and I oversaw all of the color palettes. I used to go in. This was my big claim to fame, was I could sit in a screening room and be in there with a 70 millimeter screen, up on there. This is a huge screen, and I could point out if there was a pixel that was out of place on the thing. I could find it. I just have an ability.
You just had that eye.
Yeah, I don't even know how I got it. I also have the ability, like if somebody shows me something and there's supposed to be something dead center in the middle of the frame, I can tell you if it's 1 or 2 pixels off, one side or the other. That's how, and I suppose that's just developed over time. You know, when you're drawing things and they have to be accurate, you're measuring things all the time. You're measuring the length of feathers, versus how big the duck's head is, how big this is, how big that is, where you can kind of.
So you did that. So that's very common in measuring to make sure proportions are correct.
Proportions are correct, and I think that had something to do with me being able to spot things that were off. So it was a perfect job for me. I really would look over everything, and there were a lot of other people in the room as well. This is the big thing that you learn when you work on a film. You can't take credit for that film, because that film is a collaborative effort, and everybody that works on a film like that, down to the guy that's delivering the stuff from room to room so that it gets there on time, everybody is responsible for that piece. And if one of those things breaks down, the whole production.
It's probably one of the biggest.
Chug down.
It's probably one of the biggest team collaboration projects.
It is.
Around is building a movie.
It is. It absolutely is. So when I was down in Los Angeles, I spent what was supposed to be 9 months or 8 months turned into like 16 months. It was a longer process than we thought.
So, with your experience at Disney, Warner's,
yes,
how are you incorporating all this into Art Euphoria?
Yeah. Well, so that was the thing. In it was a natural for me to try to teach people or guide people through how to paint because that was one of my big duties when I was at Disney and at Warner's. You're in charge of other artists and you're trying to get them to paint a certain way. In the case of Disney, it was the last movie. Return to Neverland was one of the last movies that they used traditional painted backgrounds on. And it was because we were trying to imitate the backgrounds that were done for the 50s version of Peter Pan, the original. So, learning and teaching guys how to paint, I figured to myself, what's the difference between teaching those guys? I mean, they already know how to paint, but you still have to push them onto making strokes a certain way and changing their style. You're asking these guys to change their style.
I would imagine that'd be really tough with creative people that are talented because you have
they don't
to
want
tell
to
them.
paint that way. And some of them didn't like it. Some would go like, I don't like that. I don't want to paint it that way. That's a stupid looking leaf. I don't want to paint that. And you'd have to get them to settle down. It's cool, and do it and show them methods where they would get very successful at it. And once they learned how to do what it was we were asking them to do, most of them kind of came around, started to appreciate it too, and started to like it. It's sort of, I guess maybe that's when you're forced, your back's up against the wall, you got to do it, you got to do it. And so I figured, what's the difference between that and teaching people who don't know how to paint, guiding them through a painting when the drawing is already on the canvas. All they have to do is paint it in. And we made sure that the stuff that we worked with, the imagery that we worked with, we tried to up the ante on the imagery. Because I've won awards before. We were nominated for an Oscar. I was fussy about what I wanted to come out of there. I wanted the stuff to look good. I didn't want it to be a bunch of just stuff that wasn't even going to make it past your garage. Once you got home, you were going to stick it in the garage, or worse, put it right in the basket, and forget about it. I wanted people to be able to go home with something that they wanted. So we started thinking about things like, what if we have workshops where we do paint your pet, or we show them how to do a self-portrait? And what they would do is send us the portraits ahead of time. We would take and get them transferred onto the canvas, which meant hand tracing in our case. We would hand
Okay, so when they show up, it's already hand traced.
It's already hand traced onto the canvas in pencil, and not simply done either. It's done so that we try to teach them some skills, try to get them to understand some things. I'm always talking about what different brushes will do. We used to do brush clinics. We eliminated them after a while, but we started out, we'd show people how to use the brush. We'd say, flat brush does this. And we'd give them test sheets to work on. And they could just sit there and make whatever they wanted with it. Because the whole idea was to show and involve the community in the arts. And it's one of the things, we would have loved to have put the place in Walnut Creek. We couldn't afford it. Walnut Creek would have been 6 times the rent that we were going with in Martinez. It would have been 6 times.
Well, Martinez is now booming, and it's a great central location.
It's not booming. It's starting to boom now. Things are changing there, leaps and bounds. Oh, man, if you look down Main Street, what used to be a lot of antique stores are now little bistros and places where you can get a drink and places where you can get a slice of pizza, New York style pizza. There's a little Greek restaurant that's cropping up there. And States Coffee brought a lot of folks in. States Coffee has a regular crowd that comes from Oakland just to sit there and drink their coffee outside States Coffee.
All the way from Oakland.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. So there's a lot starting to go on there. It's been a long time. Like, we've been there for 5 years. We were one of the first businesses where we were trying something that we knew was a little on the hipster side, and they really hadn't started coming around yet. So, you know, Martinez is a working community, you know, and Walnut Creek, on the other hand, is more of a white collar community. There would have been when you're selling art services, they're not the same, and they're never going to be the same. And I don't want to stereotype anybody or say that this is, but there is a difference in those two communities. But I wanted to put it somewhere where it would actually do some good. Mm-hmm. And we thought Martinez could use this. You know, this would be good for it. And what it did was it started to bring out all the other business kind of went, well, they've been here for 3 years and they're not done yet. Well, maybe we can do something with that. And they started finding out that it's a very charming place.
So you have Paint Your Pet.
Yeah.
You do birthday parties for kids.
We do birthday parties for kids.
And what other programs and events do you hold there too?
Well, we do adult parties.
Adult parties, and you also mentioned corporate team building events.
Corporate team building events where I'll give you an example. We did one for the dental department over at DVC. They came over and we designed a tree. And what I did was I took that tree and I broke it down into however many canvases. I think there were 20 people involved in the thing. So we worked it out where we had 20 people involved. Each one of them got a canvas, and we gave them colors, and they did the painting, right? They put the colors in place.
And it became one giant painting.
What they didn't understand when they first started the project was that they were going to be part of a big thing that was all going to be put together. And when they found out, they realized that they kind of had to work together to do that.
That's very neat.
You're checking the colors and making sure that the guy that you're going to butt up next to, that you've hit it, you know, because even though we put the lines in, there's no guarantee that the paint's going where it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
Not always.
Yeah. I did something similar with I'm on the board of realtors for Contra Costa Association, and every year we have to do some team building event. And so we went to San Francisco, and I forgot the name of the place, but it was glass blowing. And part of it was creating this giant glass logo, and we just rebranded our new logo. So we had to create the new logo in glass. So, and we each had a piece, and it's hilarious how it came out, but it was a fun experience.
Was it the Crucible?
No.
The Crucible's in Oakland, actually.
Okay, yeah, no, we were in San Francisco. I'd have to pull up the name. I've got it in my email somewhere. So, how do you come up with the name Art Euphoria? What's the history behind that?
Well, my wife was Carol, was a creative director for a long time, ad agency, design studio, and she's a graphic designer as well. And so the two of us, when it came to marketing for Art Euphoria and coming up with the name and doing all that stuff, we just applied the rules that we learned when we were in advertising about how to brainstorm a project like that. And we were looking for something that we could use where we wanted to, I hate to use the license plate thing as an example, but we were looking for something that we could spell out like that, right? That we could kind of do something clever with the spelling.
Okay.
So, and in hindsight, I will tell you this. I think this is good advice. This is only my opinion, by the way. I would never say that it's anything but an opinion. But my belief is that Art Euphoria, the name, as you read it, is difficult to get the first time. Most people go Art24IA. No, Art24IA. It's just like you and I when we sit in a car and the guy in front of us has got a vanity plate on there, and you're going, Buster Fuzzy was what? You know, and you don't know what it is, and you're starting to figure it out, and you keep running it over and over and over again, different ways.
But once it clicks, it's memorable.
Once it clicks, it's memorable. But the problem was a lot of people just, I think they got frustrated with it because they knew there was no branding there. This guy would come in and say it this way. This woman would come in and say it this way. This person would come in and say it this way, that way. And when that's happening, you don't have branding. There's no solid branding. There was no art euphoria. People didn't understand it was art euphoria. And once you told them, they went, oh, we could have spelled it differently that would have made it probably clearer, but I didn't like those combinations of letters. We were looking at stuff where art euphoria was going to be EEA, at the end, and you're looking at it and you're going, it doesn't look good. It doesn't work, So we tried to spell it out, and in hindsight, we could have probably done a better job with that. But once you roll it out and it's in there, then all you can do is try to drive it home.
Yeah.
Make sure that it works.
So what's your website if people are interested in getting some more information?
Website is arteuphoria.com.
Okay. And we'll go ahead and link that up. Now, you brought in some work here.
I did.
So let's take a look at it. And
okay.
And I know for listeners, they're not going to be able to visually see it here on the podcast, but we will have photos available on all the social channels. And, of course, we'll link up the website.
That's great. One of the things I wanted to tell you before, Carol could not be here today. And largely she couldn't be here because if you put a microphone in front of her and you ask her, say, good morning, she goes, and she can't do it. So that's why she's not here. But what I wanted to tell you about her was that she went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. She was an apprentice to an artist named Edmonds. His last name was Edmonds. And he was a realist, an American realist that was very good. And he actually, he died back in December. He died just recently. But he did egg tempera. He taught the old art of egg tempera.
Now, what is that?
Egg tempera is where they mix eggs with powdered color. And they whip it up. And, if you probably know, like if you throw an egg at somebody's car, you're going to destroy the paint because the egg just adheres to it. And it will never let go. Right. And when it does let go, it pulls some luster out of the color. Right. And you're done. So egg tempera works in as a binder. The egg is the binder, I think, that binds the pigment to the canvas. But it's a real old way of working with paint.
Very interesting.
It was really cool. And so she apprenticed for that guy, and she modeled for a couple of the paintings that he did. And so and then from there she went to Virginia Beach and got a job in an ad agency in Virginia Beach, and it led her out to Phoenix, Arizona, where I met her. And we met at this ad agency, and we were buddies for 17 years. And then circumstances kind of led themselves where we got together one time and we got married. So I've known her my whole adult life. I mean, 42 years.
Wow.
I've known her for 42 years, married to her for 25, but knew her for 42.
Wow, congratulations.
It's a long time. It's a long time to be. I know everything about her, and I know, she's a great person. Anyway, she's a very good painter in her own right. She's a realist. I think he taught her pretty well because she's very good. And we have some examples of her work at Art Euphoria that people can see. She's pretty shy about pulling her work out too. So she's not one of these. She doesn't want the headlines, She leaves the headlines to me. I handle them better. I am comfortable when you point a camera at me. I'm pretty comfortable when I get a microphone in front of me. I don't freeze up. I knew what I was going to talk about when I came here today, and it's not too difficult. But anyway, so that's a little bit about Carol. And she was sorry she couldn't be here today. There's no disrespect intended. She just, I don't know. That freaks me out. So I'm just going to show you a few things here. Well, actually, you guys can go through this as much as you want. But these were the kinds of things. These were the paintings that we would do to show a director, what we were thinking about as far as a scene is concerned.
Now, all this is hand drawn.
This is all hand painted, and what we did was, once we would finish the painting, we'd do nothing more than finish the painting and then scan it into the computer, not do anything with it except spit out digital printouts.
Wow.
That's all it was for.
So for listeners, I'm looking at a skull rock that is slightly deformed, and it looks like a pirate ship that's crashed.
Yes.
This looks like something that would be out of the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, what this was this was our design for Skull Rock, which was in Peter Pan.
Okay.
So most of the stuff I think that you're going to see right here, right now, is all associated with that film. But this just shows you the kind of quality that these folks were into. I mean, they would show. We can move these wherever you want for picture taking purposes, so you don't have to get in between things.
That's amazing.
Away from it. Yeah. So and what
I mean, just the details.
What Peter Pan, the second Peter, and these were considered just sketches. These were not full-blown paintings. These were just sketches. These were sketches that quickly defined the thing that we were trying to define. Like, you'd be surprised how simple this is put together. This area right here, just like that and like that, that's one swipe, two swipes of paint up and down to get that down there. And then the next thing you work with is just black. And you're working with black, defining where the holes in the building are, where the doors were, where the windows were. It's very simply put together when you look at it. It's all layers. And we would work with a hair dryer in one hand and a brush in the other hand. So you'd be painting and you'd be hitting it with a hair dryer real fast so it would dry. So you could continue putting things over the top of it. Because, man, these guys are under deadline and you had to move fast.
Wow.
There was no messing around. When I got there to Disney, I was told I needed to do 40 paintings a day.
Like this.
40 paintings meant, no, they weren't like this, which was, and we'll get to it later as we go through this, because there's a picture in here of some of the stuff. But
so for listeners, you have to go. We're going to post some of these photos on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
You have to go check it out. The detail on these photos is amazing. And you're saying it's extremely simple once you
understand the process of how they're put together, and you realize that a silhouette, like this silhouette, this thing is all made up of silhouettes. And we're just painting paints over the tops of those silhouettes to get the detail.
I have to take a picture of this on my phone too. This is amazing.
And these paintings here are about like this. They're about like that big, and they're like that. So they are what we would call final development paintings.
Yeah, this is amazing. I mean, for listeners, you have to go to Facebook. We'll have it there.
And it's not that they're incredible paintings. What it is how they show off the lighting and how they show off the local color of what's in the room or what's in the location that we're doing.
Definitely looks like Peter Pan.
Yeah, we studied it for months before we took any of this stuff. And I'm going to ask you a question. Is there a universe like they do with the Marvel universe, DC universe, Star Wars universe? Does Disney have like a Peter Pan in a universe where all the cartoons connect to each other? No. Peter Pan is our characters onto Peter Pan. You won't see them cross over into any other into any other. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because Disney has a character police that they go around and they look to see how those characters are being used. If one of the studios is making a project, any kind of project, even if it was like a 10-minute cartoon or something, and say they were going to use Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, and Tinkerbell, they were going to have them perform in a cartoon together, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would come in and they would make sure that each one of those characters was being treated like that character's supposed to be treated. Like, there are certain things that those characters will do, there's certain things they won't do. And recently, one of the things that happened with Disney was, in the early days of those characters, like Pluto, he bit people. Man, Pluto chased people out of the yard. He bit them, whatever it was. All of that had to be removed. They made the character, the people that designed the characters, they made them remove those things from the characteristics of those characters, which was really weird for some of us. They took, and they had, it was really cool. One really good example of something that Disney did is they had Pecos Bill was a American folk hero, right? He's the one that supposedly carved the Rio Grande, and right, he's sort of like John Henry, the guy with the hammer that built the railroad, right? It's that kind of deal. So they did this great cartoon of Pecos Bill, and he would sit on his horse, but it came to this point where he pulls out a cigarette paper, and he's got this hand, and he opens the bag, and the tobacco goes, it sails right out over there, and it just lays down perfectly inside the cigarette. And then he sticks it in his mouth, and he puts it all the way in his mouth, and a couple seconds later he just goes, and it comes out, it's already lit.
I've seen a bunch of other cartoon characters. I've seen Tom from Tom and Jerry do that.
Exactly. It's the same kind of thing. They made him take all that out. They had to remove everything that was no longer politically correct. So the basic personalities of those old characters all had to change. Like, they turned Goofy into like a buffoon kind of thing, man, where he's sort of just stupid and lame, and that wasn't what he was when he was in the early days.
Different times back then.
Yeah, he was clumsy. He always was clumsy, but he never was a dummy, And it was just really weird what they did to him, and it was all in regards to political correctness, what they could now allow the characters to do.
Interesting.
But Roy Disney, which was Walt's nephew, he used to come around and do all the character policing. And on our show in particular, because we made our movie up in Toronto, we didn't have to be inside the studio system, which was great. We had the satellite office up in Toronto, and they left us alone. Very rarely did we see the executives come in. That we were kind of on our own, and it led us to some pretty cool things. We had music done by a group called They Might Be Giants, which were really interesting guys. Once upon a time, I don't know if they're even making music anymore, but they were kind of cool. We were able to use people like Tom Waits. We were able to do some cool stuff.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah,
amazing.
But these days, it's a little different. So anyway, this stuff is all. I was going to show you these little drawings. I had mentioned that we had to do paintings, small stuff. So I'll show you one of these sequences that we had to do. I told you guys I talk a lot. I have a lot of stuff to show. I warned you. Don't say that I didn't warn you. But we do something like this, and that was a particular sequence.
This is what you were talking about earlier, then.
Yeah, this would be a particular sequence on a film. We'd take the storyboards, and we'd paint the storyboards up so that they look like this. So the guys, this is a very collaborative effort as well. The guys that worked on this, yes, I painted them, but somebody sat there and figured them all out. Someone from the layout department
So are these the color boards that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, where we would start. This is like a color script.
Okay.
We would do all these sequences so that we would get, and you're putting them together. Once you put one of these color scripts together in a long strip, you should be able to see the high moments of the film where everybody's happy and the real low moments of the film, because the low moments are these dark, they're all dark. And the high moments are all bright and cheery and it's cool, and the dark moments are all dark. So you're looking for this ebb and flow through the script that you want to.
I don't think I'm ever going to be able to see another animated film the same way. I'm going to be looking for all these different clues.
Yeah, and this would be an example of just a character sketch. Okay, the girl and her dog, and they're running. It was set in London during the Blitz. So these little things, I had to make these little things up. And these little things, they wanted them so fast that we learned to paint those characters with just a few strokes. You know, you can tell that there's not a lot that's going into that. You know, they made us work with pretty big brushes. They used to tell us, they'd say, get into your kit and get the biggest brush you can find and make the smallest mark you can make with it. And what it does is it gives you really good control over a larger brush where you can do all kinds of things. So I didn't have to change brushes or put brushes down. I'd paint my background in, and then I could go in here and I could get my brush to do that. And I could also get the same brush that made that fatty stroke there, make that skinny stroke right there. And
for the listeners, we're looking at 4 small paintings, and this is obviously Peter Pan.
Right. This again is color script stuff to show what the palette is going to look like. Because each time you put the character in a new surrounding, the flesh color has to change. The colors on his clothes change depending upon how much light is on the character.
Amazing.
So, and we used to pool light in all of our backgrounds. We'd pool the light somewhere, and that was usually where the characters were going to stand and where they were going to do their thing. So it's all a very, you know, it's an interesting process the way it goes. And the funny thing is this, you know, looking at this, you guys are welcome to look at this if you want to. The funny thing about this is this is where I came from. This is where, when Disney found me, this is what I was showing them.
Wow.
This is what they looked at and went, oh yeah. And I couldn't figure it out. I thought, why in the world would you want to mess with me? I am not what you would consider to be anything close to what a Disney guy would do, you know?
But I personally can see why, though, because
there's characters involved, and they do have kind of a friendly spirit.
Yeah.
But as you'll see as we go along here, they're not all, you know. I would also work 3D with these guys too. I'd build environments like this and then put some kind of character in the environment just to see what the camera would see if they were looking at, you know. Because we used to have to figure out a lot of camera angles too. You're figuring out how to show something the best way. If you've got 2 figures in it, or you got one, whatever it is that's in there. I wanted to get to some of the. See, this is the stuff that we were using for the short that I did for Disney. It was stuff like this. See, I'd find junk and put junk together and then paint parts of it. You know, and so this is really the stuff that put me on the map. You know, I got lucky and I got an article. They wrote an article about me in Graphis magazine, which was a big deal to get in those days. And it was a 15-page spread. It had a bunch of my work in it, and it changed my life. Because I got that, and that was printed in 5 different languages, so it went all over the world.
I like the martini glass.
Yeah. Yeah.
This one kind of reminds me of like the kind of art style from the Yellow Submarine.
Yeah, a little bit. So
That's
it's odd stuff. It is very odd stuff. It's
Yeah,
very
the
odd stuff.
attention again, the details is just amazing, and the colors.
Yeah. And when I paint, I'll usually do this when I get ready to work out a painting, a large scale painting. If I'm going to do a large scale painting, I'll do a couple of studies that are like this, and they're small studies, and they just have a certain look to them.
That is awesome.
This was this was a really unusual thing. This was a painting that was to be sent down to the people at Duck Dynasty when Duck Dynasty was on the air.
That's why the duck has a beard.
Yeah, that's why the duck has a beard. And I took a lot of time to do the painting. The painting is, I don't know, 6 feet one way and 4 feet the other way. And the painting got finished, almost finished. It was really close to being finished. And one day I was in the studio and I was doing some photography, and I needed, this is what happens around my place, I needed something to block the light from coming in, and that was handy. It was sitting right there. So I just grabbed it and I brought it over here and I put it on an easel and I set it up so that it blocked the light. I got the shot that I needed, and I left it sitting there thinking, it's fine. My friend comes walking in, he knocks into the canvas and he drives a chair right through it.
Oh my God.
So like a chair just went boom, and it punctured it like a puncture yay long and an L-shaped puncture like that, right? And so I can't send that to a client. I can't. That's not right. So I had to, I ended up keeping the painting hanging around there, and it was there for the longest time. And I finally, one day, was watching a program where somebody was repairing a canvas and they were using Bondo. And I said, Bondo, what a great idea. Bondo will work perfectly. And so I Bondoed it back together and just repainted the spot where the error was. And if you didn't know it was there, you'd never know it was there. But you turn a painting around from the back and there's this huge rip and a big hunk of Bondo that's in,
Wow.
where it is. So it was no good to anybody but me. So I still have the painting.
That's amazing.
But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I do now. I do that, and I do a lot of black and white work. That's another story for a different podcast. But yeah, that's how we kind of got to be Art Euphoria. And my idea was to I wanted to put something back in the community anyway. I made a lot and did a lot of things during my time. My career afforded me certain luxuries and things that I wouldn't have had. I got to travel. I got to meet people, and I got to travel. It was fun. And so I wanted to put something back. And I thought, kids, I like kids. And having shepherded a daughter through AAU basketball and coaching her and helping her and doing it was a natural to try to do this for children and adults alike. I just thought, if I can pass on some skills to somebody, the schools aren't going to pass these skills on anymore because they don't do it this way anymore. Yeah. So, and I think we probably could have done a lot better or would do a lot better if we were to open it up to computer-driven arts as well. But that costs a lot of money to get involved in that.
Yeah, I bet.
You have to have a certain amount of computers on hand. Everybody's got to have a computer to work on so that when you're doing something up here on the board, they can follow.
Yeah.
You have to have it. And you can ask people nowadays, bring your own pad in or bring your own computer in that you can work on. I suppose you could do that. But we'd like to provide the service, and have it be right.
Well, I think you have an amazing thing going on. Your art here is absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I'm for sure going to be signing up for some classes because that's amazing. If I can get just a little sliver of that talent, I will be so impressed.
Yeah, you never know.
So, John, thank you for being on the podcast.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubman. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at markguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.